delighted to say that a journalist, Douglas Murray, best-selling author of War on the West and the Madness of Crowds and The Strange Death of Europe, everything he writes becomes a bestseller, joins us right now. Good afternoon to you, Douglas.
Good afternoon. It's so good to be with you,
Julia.
Julia.
Morning to you, I think, where you are in the States. Thank you so much for joining us. I wish it was under happier circumstances. There's a lot to get through, a lot to talk about. I just want to ask you, first of all, about, you've written, of course, as so many people have, about what the horrific events in Israel at the weekend and subsequent events in the aftermath as well. In terms of people's reaction, the people on the left in particular, the BBC and others, the reaction to the atrocity, the brutality committed by Hamas terrorists in Israel, what do you think it tells us about them?
Well, it tells us that there's a certain faction of people in countries like Britain, where I actually am at the moment, who are simple supporters of genocide. And it's as straightforward as that. There have been protests throughout the UK in support of Hamas, and I list them actually in my cover piece in this week's Spectator. Somebody telling a crowd at a pro-Hamas rally in Brighton, for instance, that the operations, as you call it, on Saturday in Israel were beautiful. Beautiful. Imagine that. The gunning down of men and women at a music festival, the raping of women beside the bodies of their dead friends. This was beautiful, according to people on the British streets. We had demonstrations outside the Israeli embassy in London by people before Israel had even made any counterattack to the atrocities against the Israeli people on Saturday. I said earlier this week, sometimes a flare goes up and you see exactly where everyone is. And the atrocities of Saturday provided such a moment. The BBC can still not bring itself to call the terrorists of Hamas terrorists. That's to be expected. Novara Media, a radical far-left extremist publication in the UK, has had members of its staff tweeting support of the massacre of Israeli men, women and children. That's what we expected. Had Jeremy Corbyn become Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, the Novara Media would have been his press unit. These anti-Semites, racists, genocidists are all now in plain view. They celebrate the massacre of Jews. We knew they were there. They've confirmed it.
What do we do about it, though? Because, you and I are both champions of freedom of speech. I've always been of the view that if people think something as horrific as this, I think it's better that we know it so we can tackle it, so we can challenge it, and we know what people really are, what is in their hearts, what is in their heads. But how do we tackle this? Because it seems to me that this is something relatively new on the left. This isn't what I associated with the left before. These are the sort of views we associated with the right until only a few years ago.
Yes, well, of course, anti-Semitism shapeshifts. It's one of the extraordinary things about it. I've written about this a lot in the past. It can shift from right to left, left to right to extreme left, and vice versa. It can be religious, it can be ethnic hatred, it can be all sorts of things. It can be hatred of the Jews for not having a state and being stateless. It can be hatred of the Jews for having a state and having statehood. So yes, this is just, the virulent form of anti-Semitism we see in our time in the West is almost always really from the radical left and increasingly on the left. And of course, among the Muslim community, very sadly. These last few days, we have seen Muslim organizations again try to justify what has happened, try to put it in context. Always that, put it in context, as if there's a context in which the decapitation of some of the 40 babies killed in a single kibbutz in Israel must be understood. These people who say these things, who try to add this context, many of them are simply outing themselves at the moment as supporters of Hamas. And it isn't actually a freedom of speech issue. For a few years ago, a maniac lone wolf gunman in New Zealand, a disgusting man, went into a mosque and massacred some Muslims praying, a lot of people, a lot of innocent people. And if in the aftermath of that there had been protests outside New Zealand embassies around the world supporting that gunman, the Met Police and others would have stepped in within a second. They would have been prosecuted in no time. And you know what? That would have been correct. Because it is actually a crime in the UK, as it is in other countries, to support and glorify terror. Glorification of terror is a crime under the 2006 Terrorism Act in the UK. You're not allowed to support Al-Qaeda and be free. You're not allowed to support ISIS and be free. You are not allowed to support Hamas, which is a proscribed terrorist organization in the UK, and be free. So as I say in The Spectator this week, I want the people who are supporting Hamas openly, including people who are leaders of Hamas, who we know are leaders of Hamas in the UK, to be arrested, to be prosecuted, to be imprisoned, to, I think, like ISIS, have their passports withdrawn, be made stateless. If they wish to live in the Gaza, they should do. They can take their chances there. Britain doesn't want or need them. Bye-bye.